May 24th, 1944, 300 miles west of the Canary Islands. Capitan Lieutenant Siegfried von Forsner peered through U-505's periscope at something that shouldn't exist. A full-sized aircraft carrier steaming alone without escorts. Vulnerable and impossibly close. His crew had been hunting convoys for weeks with nothing to show but empty ocean and dwindling fuel. Now this gift materialized as if conjured by desperation itself. He ordered battle stations. The torpedoes were ready. Range 4,000 meters. Perfect. Then the aircraft launched. Von Forsner watched a Grumman Avenger rise from the deck, bank hard, and turn directly toward his position. Impossible. They hadn't been detected. The periscope had been up for less than 20 seconds. He ordered emergency dive, but the aircraft was already overhead, dropping depth charges that bracketed U-505 with such precision that it felt personal. What von Forsner didn't know, what none of the U-boat commanders realized until it was far too late, was that these weren't fleet carriers. They were something new, something smaller, cheaper, and infinitely more numerous than anything German naval intelligence had predicted. The Americans had built an entire fleet of escort carriers in the time it took Germany to construct 3 U-boats. And these little carriers were about to make the Atlantic Ocean uninhabitable for submarines. The transformation began with a British innovation born from pure desperation. By 1941, the gap in mid-Atlantic air coverage had become a killing field. U-boats operated freely in areas beyond land-based aircraft range, sinking merchant ships faster than Britain could replace them. The solution seemed obvious. Put aircraft carriers with every convoy. But fleet carriers were enormous, expensive, and took years to build. Britain had exactly 6 operational carriers and couldn't spare a single one for convoy duty when the Mediterranean and Pacific demanded attention. So, they improvised. HMS Audacity, converted from a captured German merchant ship, became the first escort carrier in June 1941. The conversion was crude. No hangar deck, just 6 fighters lashed to an open flight deck. No catapults, no elevators, barely enough space for the aircraft to land without sliding into the ocean. The Royal Navy called it a makeshift solution to a temporary problem. The temporary problem sank Audacity 4 months later. But in those 4 months, the little carrier had proven something remarkable. U-boats couldn't operate anywhere near a convoy if aircraft were circling overhead. The mere presence of air patrols forced submarines to remain submerged, blind and slow, unable to position for attacks. British Admiralty reports showed that convoys with Audacity suffered 80% fewer losses than unescorted groups. America was watching. And America was about to industrialize the concept in ways that would redefine naval warfare. Henry Kaiser's shipyards had already revolutionized merchant ship construction through the Liberty ship program. His engineers understood mass production, prefabrication, and the kind of ruthless simplification that let unskilled workers build complex vessels in weeks rather than months. When the Navy approached Kaiser about escort carriers in early 1942, he saw the same opportunity he'd exploited with cargo ships. Traditional carriers required specialized shipyards, expert craftsmen, and 30 months of construction. Kaiser proposed building escort carriers on merchant hull designs in 4 months, using the same techniques that produced Liberty ships. Naval architects were skeptical. These weren't cargo holds and engine rooms, and these were warships carrying aviation fuel, ordnance, and aircraft operating in combat conditions. Kaiser's team didn't care about skepticism, they cared about production rates. The Casablanca-class escort carrier emerged from this philosophy. At 512 feet long and 7,800 tons, it was less than half the size of a fleet carrier. The flight deck was just 477 feet, barely adequate for the aircraft it would operate. Maximum speed, 19 knots, slower than most fleet carriers by 10 knots. Aircraft capacity, 27 planes, a fraction of the Essex-class carrier's 90 aircraft air wing. But here's what mattered. Kaiser's Vancouver shipyard could build one every 8 days. The Navy ordered 50 in a single contract. 50 carriers that would be operational before Germany could launch 10 new U-boats. U-boat commanders in late 1943 started reporting strange encounters. Aircraft appearing where no aircraft should be. Depth charge attacks in areas supposedly beyond air coverage. The German Naval Command initially dismissed these reports as exaggeration or misidentification. Perhaps the Americans were extending land-based patrol ranges. Perhaps crews were panicking and seeing threats that didn't exist. The mathematics told a different story. In November 1943, Allied shipping losses in the Atlantic dropped to 19 ships totaling 70,000 tons. Just 6 months earlier, in May 1943, losses had exceeded 200,000 tons. Something fundamental had shifted in the Atlantic battle space. That something was USS Bogue and her hunter-killer group. Captain Giles Short commanded an experiment in offensive anti-submarine warfare. Instead of passively defending convoys, Bogue actively hunted U-boats using her aircraft as both scouts and weapons. The carrier's Avenger torpedo bombers carried depth charges and acoustic homing torpedoes. Her Wildcat fighters strafed surface submarines. The combination proved devastating. Between March and May 1943, Bogue's air group sank 5 U-boats and damaged 8 others. The carrier herself never fired a shot. The aircraft did everything. Corvette Capitan Peter Kremer, commanding U-333, encountered this new reality on July 30th, 1943. His boat was transiting the Bay of Biscay, a route German submarines had used safely for years. Suddenly aircraft. Kremer crash-dived, but the Avengers from USS Santee were already attacking. Depth charges exploded close enough to crack battery casings and rupture fuel tanks. U-333 survived only because Kremer had exceptional crew training and considerable luck. His after-action report captured the psychological impact. The aircraft appeared without warning from cloud cover at 800 meters. We had perhaps 45 seconds from sighting to submergence. This is insufficient time to properly secure the boat. If they had been 30 seconds faster, we would have been destroyed on the surface. The Atlantic has become a death trap. The technology behind these sudden appearances was as important as the carriers themselves. Escort carriers deployed with increasingly sophisticated detection equipment. ASV Mark III radar could detect a surfaced U-boat at 15 miles in good conditions. Sonobuoys dropped from aircraft, created underwater listening networks that tracked submerged submarines. Magnetic anomaly detectors sensed the metal mass of submarine hulls beneath the surface. German U-boats had been designed for a different kind of war. They expected to fight destroyers and corvettes with sonar and depth charges. Those weapons were dangerous but predictable. You could hear destroyers coming. You could take evasive action. You could dive deep and wait them out. Aircraft were different. They arrived without warning, attacked with precision, and could loiter for hours waiting for submarines to surface. A U-boat could hide from a destroyer by going deep. It couldn't hide from an aircraft that was already overhead when the periscope broke the surface. The tactical adjustments U-boat commanders attempted all failed against this new threat. Traveling submerged extended transit times and burned battery capacity. Surfacing only at night worked until escort carriers began launching night-capable aircraft with searchlights. Group tactics where multiple U-boats coordinated attacks became suicide when aircraft could vector destroyers to exact positions within minutes. Capitan Lieutenant Werner Henke, commanding U-515, was one of Germany's most successful U-boat aces with 25 ships sunk. His patrol in April 1944 demonstrated how completely the Atlantic had changed. U-515 was detected by aircraft from USS Guadalcanal, 500 miles west of Madeira. The carrier's Avengers attacked immediately, forcing Henke deep. Then they waited, For 18 hours, aircraft circled overhead while destroyers held contact. Every time U-515 attempted to surface, aircraft were already diving to attack. The submarine's batteries drained, air quality deteriorated. Finally, Henke had no choice but to surface and surrender. His interrogation report revealed the demoralization spreading through the U-boat force. We knew about escort carriers, but not their numbers. We thought they were rare. Then we discovered they were everywhere. In every convoy route, in every hunting group, sometimes 3 or 4 operating together. The Americans built them faster than we could track them. How do you fight an enemy that can put carriers everywhere? The production statistics answered that question. Between 1943 and 1945, American shipyards completed 78 escort carriers across 4 classes. Kaiser's yards alone built all 50 Casablanca-class carriers in less than 2 years. Peak production reached 1 carrier every 5 days in 1944. Germany's entire naval construction program completed 4 aircraft carriers, none of which became operational. The Graf Zeppelin, their most advanced carrier, was 85% complete when construction halted permanently in 1943. Resources that might have finished 1 carrier instead went to U-boat production. But what good were U-boats if they couldn't operate where carriers patrolled? The tactical doctrine escort carriers enabled changed everything about convoy defense. Traditional convoys arranged merchant ships in columns with destroyer escorts on the perimeter. U-boats attacked from outside this screen, relying on stealth and surprise. Escort carriers created a 200-mile air patrol radius around each convoy. U-boats couldn't get close enough to attack without being detected. USS Card demonstrated this defensive umbrella perfectly in August 1943. While escorting convoy UGS-13 from Norfolk to Casablanca, Card's aircraft detected and attacked 7 different U-boats attempting to intercept the convoy. Not a single merchant ship was damaged. The U-boats couldn't even establish visual contact with the convoy before aircraft forced them under. But the real revolution was offensive. Hunter-killer groups built around escort carriers stopped waiting for U-boats to attack convoys and went looking for them instead. These groups combined 1 escort carrier with 4 to 6 destroyer escorts in a highly mobile task force. The carrier's aircraft would locate U-boats, then vector destroyers to attack positions. It was cooperative warfare on a level U-boats couldn't counter. Captain Daniel Gallery commanded USS Guadalcanal in one of the most successful hunter-killer groups. Between January and June 1944, Guadalcanal's group sank 5 U-boats and captured U-505 intact, the only enemy warship captured by the US Navy during the war. Gallery's tactics were aggressive to the point of recklessness. He would position his carrier near known U-boat transit routes, launch continuous air patrols, and attack anything his aircraft detected. The captured U-505 yielded intelligence that devastated remaining U-boat operations. Codebooks, cipher machines, acoustic torpedo documentation, radar detection equipment specifications. But perhaps more valuable was the psychological impact. German crews knew that U-505's entire crew had been captured alive. Surrender became a realistic option rather than a death sentence. By mid-1944, U-boat losses exceeded replacement rates. In June alone, 25 U-boats were destroyed. Escort carrier air groups accounted for 11 of those kills. The mathematics of attrition had reversed completely. In 1942, U-boats sank ships faster than Allies could build them. By 1944, Allies were sinking U-boats faster than Germany could train crews. The human cost of this transformation was staggering on the German side. U-boat service, once considered an elite assignment, became a death sentence. Of 40,000 German submariners who served during the war, 30,000 died, a 75% casualty rate. Many of those deaths came in the final 18 months as escort carriers made the Atlantic increasingly lethal. Oberleutnant zur See Herbert Werner survived multiple patrols and wrote extensively about the deteriorating situation. His memoir described encountering escort carrier aircraft in March 1945. We sighted the aircraft at dawn. Before we could dive, they were attacking. Depth charges exploded so close the boat lifted completely out of the water. We survived through pure chance. The aircraft circled for 6 hours, waiting for us to surface. We couldn't outlast them. Our batteries were dying. Our air was toxic. But surfacing meant certain death. We chose toxic air. Werner's boat survived. Most didn't. The operational statistics from 1944 showed the impossible situation U-boats faced. Average patrol duration before being forced to return, 12 days. Average successful attack rate, 0.3 ships per patrol. Average U-boat survival time, 2.5 patrols. The weapon that had nearly strangled Britain in 1942 had become obsolete by 1944. What made this obsolescence particularly brutal was that U-boat technology had actually improved. The Type 21 submarine, introduced in 1944, was faster submerged than surfaced, had extended battery capacity, and could reload torpedoes in minutes rather than hours. It was the most advanced submarine design of the war, but only 4 became operational before Germany surrendered, and none sank a single ship. The problem wasn't submarine technology. The problem was that no submarine could operate effectively when aircraft could be anywhere at any time. The Atlantic had become transparent to Allied air power. Every surfacing, every periscope observation, every attempt to charge batteries carried fatal risk. Dönitz recognized this reality by late 1944. His war diary entries from November admitted that U-boat operations had become unsustainable. The enemy's air coverage is now total. Our boats cannot operate in any area without encountering aircraft. The escort carriers have created an environment where submarine warfare, as we have practiced it, has become impossible. He continued sending U-boats on patrol anyway. Not because he believed they could succeed, but because admitting failure meant admitting the war was lost. The final irony was technological. Germany had the world's first jet fighters, the most advanced rockets, sophisticated acoustic torpedoes, and submarine designs that wouldn't be matched for decades. But they couldn't mass-produce simple escort carriers because their industrial base was built for precision engineering, not rapid mass manufacturing. America's advantage wasn't superior technology, it was superior industrial philosophy. Kaiser's shipyards proved that adequate equipment available in massive quantities defeats superior equipment available in limited numbers. The 50 Casablanca-class carriers weren't particularly good ships. They were slow, cramped, uncomfortable, and prone to mechanical problems. But there were 50 of them operational simultaneously. When the war ended in May 1945, escort carrier aircraft had sunk or assisted in sinking 53 U-boats. They'd damaged dozens more beyond repair. They'd forced hundreds of U-boats to abort patrols without attacking. They'd made the Atlantic so dangerous for submarines that Germany's once dominant U-boat force spent the final year of the war essentially hiding. The transformation from November 1943, when von Forsner encountered what he thought was a vulnerable carrier, to May 1945, when U-boats couldn't safely surface anywhere in the Atlantic, took just 18 months. In that time, escort carriers had solved the problem that Britain's audacity had identified but couldn't scale. They'd industrialized air coverage to the point where submarines simply couldn't function. Von Forsner survived the war in prisoner camps, captured when aircraft from USS Guadalcanal forced U-505 to surface. In post-war interviews, he was asked what surprised him most about American naval power. His answer captured the entire strategic shift. Not that you had carriers. We knew about carriers. What shocked us was that you had carriers everywhere. Everywhere we went, there were aircraft. We couldn't understand how you built so many so fast. That's when we knew the Atlantic was lost. The little carriers built on merchant hulls in Kaiser's shipyards had accomplished what battleships and cruisers couldn't. They'd made the ocean uninhabitable for submarines through the simple expedient of being everywhere at once. Quantity had its own quality, and that quality was omnipresence.